Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Tuesday afternoon. It's very cold. It's very depressing over here, mainly because finals week is starting up real soon. But that's besides the point. We still got to talk about sports, and we are obviously going to talk about the Monday Night Football game yesterday in the first segment. I mean, that was a really good game, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then in the second segment, we're going to shift our focus to the NBA, focusing on LeBron James, because LeBron is playing like the worst player in the NBA right now. I can't even lie. He is playing awful. And then in the third segment, we're going to look at some NFL news, like over last week that I didn't really get to cover. We're going to do all of that in the third segment because there was a couple of things that I missed out on talking about, and I kind of want to make sure that we have a segment talking about that as well. Then in the fourth segment, we're going to talk about Bryce Young and his resurgence into the starting position for the Panthers, because he's been playing very well recently, and I kind of want to bring that to everyone's attention. And then we obviously have the fifth segment, which is a very special one, so be sure to stay tuned for that at the end if you guys are curious to figure out what that is. Before I begin talking about this Browns game, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, or whether it's something that you're just dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Or you can use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, if you don't want to use Super Chat. And it does the same thing. They both help the show make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's get right ahead. Let's get into this game. So the final score was 41-32 in favor of the Broncos. This was a shootout for the ages. Definitely one of the most entertaining games I've seen in a while. Obviously, we all like these high-scoring games, but it's not like there was absolutely no defense being played in this game either, because both quarterbacks threw 2 or more interceptions in this game. So there was definitely defense, and these kinds of games are very exciting to watch when you see big plays happen. I mean, there was this one instance, Bo Nix, he threw like a 70-plus yard touchdown pass, and then immediately afterwards, the Browns ended up responding with, I believe it was Jerry Jeudy, who ended up catching a 70-yard pass for a touchdown to answer that right back. It was a very, very competitive game, and it really it concluded towards the very end. I mean, this was a great game. I really enjoyed watching this game, and the stats of this game were absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Jerry Jeudy ended the night with 9 receptions and 235 receiving yards and a touchdown. That is incredible fantasy points right there. And then there was also Elijah Moore, who ended the game with 8 receptions on 111 receiving yards. He didn't catch a touchdown, but again, 111 receiving yards is incredible. And on the Broncos side, they also had 2 players who had more than 100 receiving yards. They had Marvin Mims Jr., who was the player who returned a player who received the touchdown that I was talking about that the Broncos ended up scoring. It was a 93-yard touchdown pass, and that was basically the biggest reception of the entire night for him and what put him over the top in the receiving corps. And then there was also Cortland Sutton, who ended the game with 6 receptions on 102 receiving yards in the game, which was also very impressive. Again, this game was all around, this game felt like a little bit of a Madden game, honestly. When those in those games you have those the high scoring games, and then you have some defensive stops here and there because both quarterbacks are being a bunch of gunslingers. Because Bo Nix in this game, he completed 18 of his 35 passes and threw for 294 yards, but he did end up with 2 interceptions, and he only threw for 1 touchdown. But regardless, they came out with the win thanks to their defense and thanks to Jameis Winston. Now, in this game, I guess Jameis Winston wanted to be Santa because Christmas came early for the Broncos in this one because he gave them 3 interceptions, and 2 of them were pick sixes. So in total, he threw 6 touchdowns, 2 of them to the other team, 4 of them to his own team, and he threw for 497 passing yards in this game. Which was, I mean, he threw the ball 58 times, but still, that number is ridiculous, especially coming in from someone with Jameis Winston. But this is literally, like, a lot of people on the internet are dubbing this as the ultimate Jameis Winston game, because it's like, you'll get some great moments from Jameis, and then you'll get some of the worst moments ever imaginable from Jameis. And this game was the perfect example from that. It was like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but his last season, I believe, in Tampa Bay, or one of the last seasons, I believe. The season before Tom Brady got to Tampa Bay. I'm sure a lot of people will remember that a little bit more. But Jameis Winston, he threw 9 more interceptions that year than any other player. So he threw like 30-something interceptions. I think it might have been 30 interceptions, and was the first quarterback since, ironically, another Tampa Bay quarterback to throw that many interceptions. And despite all those interceptions, the team was 7-9. They didn't win their division, but they had, again, it was a 7-9 record, so it was solid. It wasn't great, it was solid. And it was most of the games, well, there were a couple of games where they ended up losing by 1 score or like by 1 little mistake. And their record could have easily been better than 7-9 that year, but it's like, I remember they lost to the Giants that year when the score was like, when both teams had 30 points and their kicker missed a chip shot field goal. I don't remember the exact score of that game, but I do know that the Giants ended up winning because thanks to the Tampa Bay's kicker missing. And then they also lost 2 overtime games in that season where I believe they never touched the ball. And it was, again, these were like only a few plays away from being able to win a lot of these games. And the Bucs offense that year was 9th in points per drive and 11th in yards per drive. And despite Jameis Winston throwing 30 interceptions, he still led the league in passing yards, and he was top 2 in passing touchdowns in the league. So the team was much better than the record, very talented. Also one of the reasons why Brady won a Super Bowl the next year. But no one wants to talk about that. But that year basically just sums up Jameis Winston, what you're going to get from him. And this game sums it up along with that season as well. You're going to get good moments from Jameis, but you're also going to get some stinkers and some really bad moments that end up costing the game. I mean, those pick sixes that he threw and the final one at the end of the game to seal the win for the Broncos, those were really bad passes. Like, in fact, those 3, he was good in this game outside of 3 passes. And you can argue that he was good outside of 2 passes more so than he was good outside of 3. But it's like, these moments are, football is a game of inches, and these moments were what caused him to lose the game. But aside from that, great win and for the Broncos, and I really like these kinds of games. It doesn't, like, these quarterbacks, they did not go for checkdowns. They did not go for many checkdowns. They were like, we're either going to put the ball in the end zone or we're going to take a shot, which is, those are the kind of games that I like. But it's just the league has sort of evolved into a more efficiency-based league where it's like, you got to maintain this efficiency, you got to do this, and you got to do that. And it kind of makes the game a little bit boring because I know, like, one of the things that I absolutely despise is, let's say it's 3rd and 10, right? And the goal of the game, obviously, is to try to get a first down. I cannot stand it when quarterbacks, they default to a check down instead of just trying to take a shot down the field. It's like, be a man and throw the ball down the field. That's just my thoughts. Those are my opinions on it. It obviously depends on the situation when you want to be a man and take a shot and throw the ball down the field. But again, this efficiency era, it's been a little bit boring from time to time. But this was a great shootout, and I liked how both quarterbacks, they were trying to take shots and this and that and the other. But obviously, we know the Browns, they have pretty much nothing to lose, since they are one of the worst teams in the NFL right now and one of the worst teams with one of the worst records in the NFL. But the Broncos, they were fighting for something. They've been trying to fight for a spot in the postseason. Now, they're in the AFC West, and the Chiefs obviously already clinched a playoff spot, and now they're behind the Chargers in their division in the AFC West, and they have to try and maintain this good record that they have in order to have a shot of making it into the postseason. Like, as long as they're able to have a better record than teams like the Colts and teams like the Ravens, and maybe even the team in their own division like the Chargers, then that's when they're going to make the playoffs. They just have to have a better record than at least one of those teams, and they'll make the playoffs. I'm pretty sure the Ravens are going to end up making the playoffs this season. I mean, Lamar and Derrick Henry, they've been phenomenal with each other. And the Chargers, they seem to be like in a good spot as well, so that might be a team that they're also not going to be able to pass, even though their records are really close. Like, the Chargers are 8-4, and the Broncos, they're 8-5. So, really, the most realistic option that I can see where the is that they have to have a better record than the Colts, and once they have a better record than the Colts, then they ultimately clinch the playoffs, because it'll go like this, right? So the Chiefs are going to make it, obviously. The Bills are also going to make it because they clinched as well, and the Steelers most likely going to make it. If the Steelers aren't going to be able to take that home wild card, then it'll be the Ravens who are going to take that home wild card. So you can flip-flop between either of them to figure out which one is going to be, which one would take the home or away game. It wouldn't really matter. And then in the AFC South, the Texans are probably going to take the home wild card spot. And the Colts, they aren't really as close to the Texans as the Broncos are close to the Chargers. And the Colts, they do not have, they're not as close to the Broncos as they are to the Texans. Actually, they're more or less the exact same between the Broncos and the Texans. So if the Texans lose out, then there is a chance that the Colts could take the home wild card. But regardless, it seems like the Broncos, they're in a really, really good position to make the postseason right now. And that would be really impressive when you have a rookie quarterback. Obviously, like, normally, if situations were a little bit different, like if the season was played out a little bit different, then it would probably be the Cincinnati Bengals who would make it to the postseason instead of the Broncos, because, I mean, the Bengals, their biggest problem is, shockingly, their defense. Like, this is Joe Burrow having a Drew Brees kind of season, or even a Peyton Manning kind of season. I think Drew Brees makes a little bit more sense, because it's like, he's playing phenomenally. He is playing absolutely great. But the defense is holding the team down. Similar to how on the Saints, Drew Brees would be absolutely phenomenal and he would be incredibly efficient, but his defense would be ranked as the worst defense in the league, ultimately holding him back. And they would miss postseasons because of their defense. Their offense would be number one ranked, but their defense, because they can't stop a nosebleed, would cost them games. It's a similar concept here with the Bengals. So that's really all that I have in this segment. Again, great game, and the Jameis Winston experience was the Jameis Winston experience. And so we're going to go and shift our focus to NBA basketball, because LeBron James, my glorious king, he is playing like absolute... I can't even finish that sentence. It's so bad. That is how bad he has been playing. There are no words to describe it. In fact, it's otherworldly. We've never seen LeBron play this bad before. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose again. lift off.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about LeBron James and his something in my eye and his shooting woes. And like this is something that I've never thought I'd had to talk about. So we're going to get into this segment. Before I begin, though, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, something you've been dying to share. We're all ears. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat, or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net. To use Super Chat, you just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. And they really help the show. So let's get into the second segment, which is all about LeBron James. Now, he has been playing awful. There is really no other way around it. Well, let me rephrase that. He's been shooting awful. Like, his overall stats are great, but when you don't shoot the ball that well, I think you're more of a detriment to a team than you are actually helping a team. I do this with Russell Westbrook a lot. It's like every single time he'll have a good game, I would point out his pitiful shooting, or like whenever he'd have not necessarily a good game, but whenever he'd have a game where he puts up a lot of stats. Like I remember on Washington, he put up like 19 points and had like 18 rebounds, I want to say, but he also had like 11 interceptions, and he was like maybe 8 for 21 from the field. I don't remember the exact box score, but obviously that's like the most Russell Westbrook box score ever. And I would call that a bad game because Russ would shoot abysmally, and really the only thing he's doing is padding his stats with the rebound and the assists. So I have to be fair and do the same thing with LeBron here. So there were some games, obviously, he had a triple-double in one of those games, but he shot absolutely abysmal from the field. So here's the crazy stat. In the 22 years, I believe, that LeBron has been playing in the NBA, and for the most part of his career, LeBron has only had 3 instances where he shot under 45% in 6 games in a row. So let me say that again. In all the years that LeBron has played, he's only had 3 instances where he's gone on a 6-game streak where he shot 45% from the field or less. That is very inefficient, that it's 6 games in a row. And it should be pointed out that 2 of those times where he went on this similar shooting slump were when he was a rookie and just entering into the NBA. And so the first instance was in the 2003-2004 season, where LeBron had a 6-game streak of shooting under 45% in April 2004, and he had a 12-game streak of shooting under 45% from December all the way up to January. So that was the only time where LeBron had a shooting stretch this bad up until now. And he's never, ever had a shooting stretch this bad since his rookie season, which started as an 18-year-old straight out of high school. Like, it makes sense for him to have those shooting woes afterwards, like literally directly after high school. It makes total sense. But this does not make sense. This is a very, very bad stretch for LeBron. And in the last 4 games, I believe, LeBron has been unable to make a single 3-pointer, which again, that is also very bad, because it's like, where on earth did your shooting go? What happened, right? And again, in these last 4 games, he's been absolutely abysmal shooting the 3-pointer. So against the Spurs, LeBron's stats, they look like this. 16 points, 11 assists, 10 rebounds. That sounds good. That sounds great. But when you look at the shooting, he went 8 for 18 from the field and 0 for 2 from 3. So he ended the game with more shot attempts than points. Like that's not good. In my opinion, that's not good. You can do a lot of the other things for the team, but when you're shooting that bad, that is not good. Then in the next game against OKC, he ended with 12, 6, and 8. Again, not a good stat line. Another game where he took more shots than points scored. 5 for 13, 0 for 4 from 3 with 12 points. So that was also bad. Now, the game where the Lakers beat the Jazz on kind of a fluky game because for some reason the Jazz, they decided to call a timeout when Colin Sexton literally was about to drive to the basket and win the game. And it ultimately allowed the Lakers to win it in the end. LeBron ended with 27, 14, and 5. That sounds good, right? Until you look at the shooting, where he took 28 shots and he made 12 of them. So that's another game where he ended with more field goal attempts than points scored. And he shot 0 for 9 from 3, which was disgusting. And now in the most recent game where the Lakers got destroyed 109-80 to the Timberwolves, he ended the game with 10 points, 4 assists, and 8 rebounds. And he then shot 4 for 16 from the field and 0 for 4 from 3. Another game where he ended with more shot attempts than points scored. This is historically bad shooting coming in from LeBron. And it really it makes me think that this might be the decline of LeBron that everybody was waiting for and that everybody thought was going to happen 6 years ago. Now it's happening here. And it could not be at any worse time than right now. This is usually the time where the Lakers get called a mediocre team when LeBron gets these washed accusations. But now it's not even like he can defend those washed accusations with how he's been playing. He's been absolutely terrible shooting the three. It's 0 for 24 is unacceptable. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how young you are. 0 for 24 from 3 is simply unacceptable. And these kinds of efficiency woes is something that the Lakers absolutely do not need coming from LeBron. LeBron is, at the very least, their second best player on the roster. Right now, it seems like he is not even the third best player on the roster with how he's been shooting. But Anthony Davis is on a little bit of a slump, so it's all expected on LeBron to be able to perform this well, and he's just not able to do so recently. And I don't know what on earth is going on, but this is really, really bad. And this could be the decline that a lot of people sort of began to expect coming in from LeBron, because it's we've never seen LeBron shoot this bad before. And the last time he did it was when he was a rookie. So is the decline coming? It seems like it might be. He's already said that there isn't much that he has left in the tank. So I'm a little bit worried that this might be the final season for LeBron, depending on how it goes. Either that or he's just doing his best Bronny impersonation with these games. But this is really bad. This is really, really, really bad for LeBron, and no one is really going to forget about this because it is LeBron. I doubt people are going to forget about him shooting this bad. But aside from that, all I can really say now is to enjoy LeBron for the time that we have, because LeBron is not going to be in the NBA forever, and we're starting to finally see a decline coming in from his game. Not that I like that we're seeing a decline, but again, it's everyone sort of expected him to decline at least 6 years ago at the very least. And the fact that he's been able to even play in this league at such a high level for this long, it really does say a lot. But this is just not ideal. It also doesn't help that LeBron is committed to playing all 82 games in this season, which he has not done, by the way. I'm pretty sure there have been a couple of games where LeBron has missed, and again, this is another situation that's just not ideal for LeBron, where it's he's trying to, how should I say this? He's trying to sort of force his way into playing a lot of these games, and I don't really think that's the best idea for him, mainly because it's like, again, he is the oldest player in the NBA. I can't even say one of the oldest anymore because he is the oldest player in the NBA, and he wants to play 82 games in the season. Meanwhile, Joel Embiid doesn't even want to play 2 consecutive games in the season. It's like, it's not very good. It's not a very good situation to be in if you're the Lakers right now, just based off of this shooting. It's been really, really, really bad. And on the Timberwolves side of this game, I might as well recap this game. No one really played that well. I mean, Rudy Gobert was almost the leading scorer for the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards, he was 3 for 13 and 1 for 5 from the field. He was bad, and this game was extremely winnable for the Lakers. It's just they completely slumped. And, I mean, the rest of the Timberwolves team, they shot phenomenally from the field. They shot 42% from 3 compared to the Lakers, who shot 19% from 3. So when you're shooting like that from the three-point line, that is just not ideal. And when D'Lo is the leading scorer, that's also not ideal. Anthony Davis, he also did not have a really good game. I don't know what's going on, but, like, Anthony Davis, he had an MVP, like, campaign in the beginning of the season, and then a few games later, he just completely drops the ball and plays worse. He plays like Kevin Garnett on the Nets, honestly. That's sort of what he's playing like right now. It's so weird, Anthony Davis' situation. I don't understand it. He is very frustrating. I've said this before, but it's like he only plays well when he's bullied or forced into playing well. And it's almost as if he doesn't it's almost as if he needs people to tell him to try hard instead of just automatically trying hard. It doesn't make sense to me. But it's like, in these last few games, Anthony Davis has not been the same MVP caliber player that we saw from in the beginning of the season. He did have a good game against the Jazz, but then, again, before that game, when they matched up against the Thunder, and he basically just was non-existent in that game. And he almost got outplayed by Isaiah Hartenstein. He did get out-rebounded significantly, but his offense was just, it was not there. He was much more passive in that game than usually, and I don't understand, like, what the issue is. I don't know what the deal is, but it's not good. It's definitely not a good sign for the Lakers right now. Again, this might just be their slump, but yeah, this is not good. So that's all that I really have to say in this second segment. I mean, like, LeBron is playing, like, really bad. He's shooting really bad. So I'm not entirely sure how long this streak is going to continue, but they cannot have this continue any longer. This is like, you have to not do that. So that's all that I have in the second segment. So now we're going into the third segment where I talk about some NFL news. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about in the segment. Just give a little bit of an update on, like, situations going on and team drama, things like that. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about some NFL news that's going around and some things that I really didn't get to cover in a couple of segments that I think I sort of should. And I wanted to cover this one yesterday. I've actually wanted to cover a lot of them yesterday, but I didn't really get the chance to do that, so I'm going to do that right now. And we're going to start off with the Aaron Rodgers little the thing that's going on with Aaron Rodgers, because like I can't really give a word exactly what's going on with Aaron and like the Jets right now. I mean, we all know that the season is a complete disaster class, but what really added on to the drama was this article that was released after, it was actually before this weekend where the Jets ended up blowing the game. Hi, Anthony, in the chat. And so before the Jets ended up blowing the game to the Seahawks, there was an article going around that said that that claimed that Aaron Rodgers wanted to play in 2025, but he did not want to play for the Jets. And obviously that made a bunch of headlines. And Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show, and he ended up telling Pat McAfee and the guys that are on the show that he has no idea how that story ended up getting out, because he has never said anything about playing next year, and he's never said that if he was going to play next year, it wouldn't be for the Jets. The Jets would be, apparently they would be the first option on who he would want to play for. And the sports writer who wrote about this also has a tendency of actually, from my knowledge at least, she has a tendency of somewhat taking sources and not giving those sources any credit, and trying to claim those sources as her own. So it's been, I noticed that there was an Instagram user who claimed that this same writer that's been spreading this fake news around about Aaron Rodgers and who he wants to play for next year was the same writer who ended up stealing some of his work. And obviously he the Instagram user does not like that, and completely supports Aaron Rodgers just calling this writer out. And this was just like one of the instances where the writer, I believe the writer's name was Rossini, something like that. Like, I know that was probably like one of the last, either her last name or her first name. I'm not entirely sure. But Rodgers answered saying, "I don't talk to that person in my circle, and my circle is really small. I don't have a relationship with reporters who are going to break stories like that. I haven't told anybody in my life that I want to play in 2025 and not on the Jets. That's 100% false, and I actually said the opposite." So this is this is just the sports writer just not knowing exactly what they're talking about. I was wrong for assuming that this is oh, there you go. Manzano's in the chat saying Diane Rossini. So I got the last name right, but again, not entirely sure what the first name was. But let's see. He also has some questions that I didn't even notice. Is it possible that Aaron Rodgers may be mentally refusing to admit that he doesn't have the arm strength and talent that he used to have? And also possibly switching up his game and using his brain a lot more and being able to read the field like you saw with Peyton when he got to Denver when his arm was gone after his back surgeries. I don't think his arm strength has gotten weaker. I genuinely don't. I think the Jets, they have way more problems on the team this season than Aaron Rodgers individually. And I don't really think all of these losses, while I will say that Aaron didn't really play well in some of these games, it's not like he ended up losing the game for the Jets either. There have been several like miscues and mess ups from all of the positions on the Jets roster, whether it be the defense. I mean, we all know Sauce Gardner is not having nearly as good of a season as we thought he would have. There's also their kicker, who's been missing important field goals and important extra points that they ended up botching as well. And while Aaron was not perfect in a lot of these games, it's not like he was the only reason why they would lose a lot of these games. And it's not like he doesn't have a brain to make these plays and read defenses better. But again, when the offensive line is completely overwhelmed and doesn't give Aaron all that much protection, there's not really much that the quarterback can do. But again, like I said, Aaron is not perfect, and he's obviously had several games where he could have played a lot better and definitely played at a level that we expected him to, the same MVP caliber player from Green Bay. but that just hasn't happened yet. So I'm not going to act like Aaron Rodgers is completely null and void from these teams' issues. But so far, basically what this entire thing is that I don't know and no one knows what's going to happen to Aaron Rodgers after the season. So do not take how should I say this? Do not take what I said in that other segment with Aaron Rodgers talking about how he wants to be on a different team. Do not take that seriously at all. That was a report, and that was a false report, and that was my bad, because again, it's like, I thought the sports writer was credible. I mean, why would they post that article if it wasn't credible on a very credible source? Did not make sense to me, so that's my bad. But Anthony's in the chat saying, no, I'm not blaming Aaron on the dysfunction of the Jets. That franchise has been dysfunctional the past 2 decades. I'm just saying him specifically as an older player or an athlete sometimes. They refuse to admit that they're past it. I mean, why would they want to admit that they're past it? Like, you can't admit that you don't have it when the season is still going on, because that ultimately gives the other teams more of an advantage when they're ready to play you. And it'll give them another more of a confidence booster. Granted, it's like, when you're playing the Jets, that's really the only confident booster that you need right now, but towards the beginning of the season, it's like you can't really give that away. So now we're going to move on to some other news in regards to the NFL right now, more focusing on the Niners than with the Jets, because honestly, like, I can't even fathom the Jets. Anthony Manzano said, no, she is credible, but she doesn't really have any connections to Aaron to incorporate her reporting. Sure, she might be credible, but again, she does, at least according to an Instagram user that uncovered NFL. I really like that account. He claims that the writer ended up stealing some of his content and things like that he posts online. So, and did not give credit at all. So that's like why I was like, okay, maybe she's not all that credible as I thought. But again, that's neither here nor there. So for the Niners, they're suffering a little bit of a crisis, and I call that crisis the Madden curse, mainly because Christian McCaffrey, he's barely played many snaps in the season today, and in the season as of right now, excuse me. And ever since his return, he's been less than mediocre. Like, he has not been the same monster that we remembered from his first few years on San Fran, and when he eventually got to San Fran, right? So the Niners, they're apparently placing both of their running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, on injured reserve, meaning that they're both going to be out for at least 4 weeks. McCaffrey is going to be out at least 6 weeks with a PCL knee injury, meaning his season is most likely going to be over, barring a miraculous playoff run from the Niners. So it's like, I don't think the Niners are going to make the playoffs this year, especially with McCaffrey injured. And Jordan Mason, he's going to be out at least 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain that he suffered in last night's game. And this is just, again, this is incredibly unlucky coming in from the Niners, and the only way that I can really explain it is just calling it the Madden curse, because that's really what it is. It's like you really cannot make these injury woes up. It's like it's so unfortunate for the Niners. I mean, I'm kind of laughing on the inside, but again, this is very unfortunate for the Niners and their situation that they're in. It's really like, ugh. And Manzano's in the chat. With Brandon Ayuk, do you think this contract was a bad idea? Because it seems like once he got the money, he doesn't really want to perform. I mean, that's what it's looking like. Excuse me. That's what it's really looking like in this one. And it's I don't want to jump the gun and say it was bad just yet, because, like, again, it might just be a little bit of a slump. We don't know. It might be a slump, but again, he's not really playing like he deserves all that money. That is for sure. Was the PCL injury that McCaffrey had a non-contact injury during a play, or was it direct contact to his plant leg? I'm pretty sure. I mean, it didn't say anything about a non-contact injury. But again, he was playing in the snow, so I didn't really watch the entirety of that game. I'm not even going to lie. I watched only the highlights of that game. It was late. I had to go back to school, and I was incredibly tired on that Sunday, so I just decided to take the night off from watching football. Very rare thing that I do, but I'm actually going to go ahead and check real quick, because I don't think it was a non-contact injury, but yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't a non-contact injury. Obviously it wasn't targeted, but it's like there was a play where it was a little bit rough and it obviously hurt him. So it was not a non-contact injury. It's not like he was trotting onto the field and just boop, there it goes. And now we're going into the final thing, because I do have to wrap this up a little bit. The Bears firing their head coach, Matt Eberflus. Now, some people, they might not think this is a good idea to fire him now because of Caleb Williams, and, giving Caleb Williams a completely new coach in the middle of the season, that's never a good thing for a young quarterback, constantly switching around between coaches and coaches. It's not a good thing. And the reason why Eberflus was fired was mainly because of the last game, where there was absolutely terrible clock management on Thanksgiving. I mean, the Bears, they had one timeout left and they refused to use it. And they could have probably won the game, or at the very least sent it into overtime. But for some reason, the coach just refused to call a timeout. And he thought it was a good decision, which ultimately ended his career with the Bears. That's really all it was. And I mean, in the last 6 games that the Bears have played, they've lost all 6 of those games, and they lost 3 of those games, 3 back to consecutive games actually, by 1 scores to NFC North opponents, right? And he became the first head coach in team history to be fired in the middle of a season, which is not a very good thing to be remembered, obviously. And it's one of the big reasons for him getting fired was because of the not just that Lions game where they managed the clock horribly, but also because he has a 5-19 record in 1-score games, which is the worst in NFL history among coaches with at least 20 games under their belts, right? He just cannot close out games. And obviously, you do not want a coach that has no idea how to close out games. It's like Doc Rivers in the playoffs. You do not want that coach in the playoffs. And it's Warren acknowledged on Monday that it wasn't an easy decision to fire Eberflus, but conceded that it was the right time, and that having interim head coach Thomas Brown in the building helped convince the leadership team that a transition was needed. So obviously, this was a long time coming. I did not like the Bears head coach at all. He might have been a big reason why Justin Fields wasn't as good as people expected him to be, but yeah. That's all that I really have to say in this segment. I'll answer the final questions before I go on a break. I don't really pay attention to that type of stuff. Can you explain to me the difference between Can you explain to me the difference between non-contact injury and just a standard injury in terms of the same injury, such as a PCL? So non-contact injury is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally just a play where you did not get touched at all, but something pops or something gets dislocated because you had an awkward position because of the turf, something like that. It's like, how should I say this? So like, imagine you're lifting weights, right? This actually happened to a friend of mine once. So imagine you're lifting weights, right? And out of nowhere, you hear a pop. That's a non-contact injury right there. It's literally just random plays where you don't expect there to be a pop, but there's just a pop in your leg, or there's a pop in your arm, something like that. Something happens and it feels weird. That's essentially what that is. It's like, it's not something that you can really, it's bad luck, more or less. It's not something that players can really control, because it's like, again, they're just going through a similar motion, but maybe one tiny thing is off in that motion and that ultimately snaps their leg or something like that. That's usually what a non-contact injury is. Like, there are instances where some players in the NFL, they're running and like everything's fine, but then like they pull a hamstring or something like that just by running, and then they're out for a couple of weeks. That's essentially what a non-contact injury is, where it's like, you're running, you're doing your thing, and it's like, ow, what the heck was that? That's what that is. With how well he is doing now as an offensive coordinator for Washington, is it possible you can see the Bears hiring Cliff Kingsbury as the next head coach? I don't know about that, but that is actually a very interesting take. That is definitely one for development. And the final question before I go into the break. So basically a freak injury like a baseball player tearing their ACL during a home plate celebration. Something like, yes, exactly like that actually. It's literally the definition of a non-contact injury, because it's like it just happens completely out of nowhere and you don't really expect it to happen like that. Now, it's literally just like I can't really think of any recent players to my knowledge that have suffered a non-contact injury that's like a really good example, but I'll think of one eventually. But I have to go into this break and get into the fourth segment, because we are going to be talking about Bryce Young and his resurgence into the NFL starting lineup with the Panthers. So I'll be right back after the short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm going to be talking about Bryce Young and his resurgence. But before I do, I would like to answer the question that Anthony had in the chat, because he was asking like what was the difference between a regular injury and a non-contact injury. And I just remembered an example for it. So I don't know if you watched this, but the Super Bowl between the Bengals and the Rams, I don't know if you remember that game, but Odell Beckham Jr., he ended up going out in the middle of that game, and he went out due to a non-contact injury. So if you want to like look up the Super Bowl and you look up Odell Beckham Jr.'s injury, then you'll see what a non-contact injury is like. But essentially what he was doing was he was just trying to catch the ball. The ball was a little bit thrown behind him instead of like in front of him, so he had to contort his body a little bit awkwardly, and because of that his right foot, I believe, or maybe his left, I don't know entirely which foot it was, but it was awkward. It was an awkward position. There was nobody near him. He dropped the pass, but then he went down with an injury, right? So it was a completely awkward play for him. And you can go ahead and look at that video if you're interested. But yeah, that was the Super Bowl between the Bengals and the Rams, when the Rams ended up beating them a couple years ago. So that's what a non-contact injury is. But let's get into this segment talking about Bryce Young. Now, he has been unbelievable in these last few games for the Panthers. And when I thought he was going to be a bust, I cannot lie, I thought he was going to be a complete bust for the majority of his career, but it seems like he has been on a little bit of a comeback. I don't know what it was, but that benching has completely flipped his play style and has completely flipped everything that we know about Bryce Young. So in the last few games that Bryce Young has played, he has 858 passing yards, 5 total touchdowns, and only 1 interception. He has an 84.6 passer rating, which is third in the NFL in the last 5 weeks, which again, really, really good. And another stat, he has also been able to lead his team to a game-tying or a game-winning drive in all 4 of the games that he's been playing. He has been, the last 4 games, right? He has been incredible. And he's also led the Panthers to back-to-back wins for the first time since 2021. This is just a complete resurgence coming in from Bryce Young, right? I thought about, again, I always thought that Bryce Young, even when he was getting into the league, he was a very highly touted draft pick. But in his first year, I wrote him off entirely. I thought he was going to be a bust. I thought he was too short to be playing that quarterback position. Kyler Murray, he's short as well, but again, it's like Kyler Murray is completely different. He's actually good, and he knows how to scramble and all that stuff. And this is a rookie. Comparing a rookie to Kyler Murray is like child's play. Get it? Because they look like children when they run on the field. But regardless, I wrote him off entirely. He had a 2-14 record as the starting quarterback in last season, and I didn't think it was going to get any better, especially with the start of this season going in, where he threw more interceptions than he threw touchdowns. I did not think that Bryce Young was going to be able to play this well in the last few games that he's been playing in. So he started out the year going 1 for 5 in touchdowns to interceptions, and now in the year he is 6 for 6 for touchdown to interception ratio. So not all that good, but in the last few weeks that he's been playing, you can see that he increased that efficiency, and he's been playing much better than what he did in the first few years, or in the first year, excuse me. I know the injury you're talking about. He basically blew out his knee planting it in the middle of a route. Yes, that's exactly what that is. That is exactly what that is. I think the track record of Alabama quarterbacks made you hesitant to believe Bryce was going to be successful in the NFL. Yeah, a little bit. Definitely a little bit. But then again, it's not like he was really playing all that well to make me think he wouldn't be a bust either. And it was more... I have more of an unreliance in Ohio State quarterbacks more so than I have an unreliance in Alabama quarterbacks. At least with their track record and what's been going on over there. I mean, there is C.J. Stroud, but now C.J. Stroud is also not really playing all that great. And then there was Justin Fields, who was like unbelievably terrible when he was on the Browns. I mean, he's been playing a little bit better on the Steelers, but again, he is the backup for a reason. But with Bryce Young, it was really like his size. When I saw that the offensive lineman would tower over him and he would barely be able to see what's in front of him, I thought it was bad news. Like, I didn't really think it would be the end-all, be-all because, again, Kyler Murray. But based off of last season and how he started out in the beginning of the season, I completely wrote him off as a bust, and I didn't think that there was anything that he could have done. Now, that didn't mean that I felt like it was a good idea for him to be benched, because I honestly did not think it was a good idea for him to be benched, because I was like, all right, you guys have nothing, the Panthers have nothing to lose, right? You'd rather want to see Bryce Young take the field and gain that experience as opposed to Andy Dalton, where, like, you know what you're going to get from Andy Dalton, but Bryce Young, while I wrote him off as a bust, there was still small glimmers of hope because of his age. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt with that, and I thought it's most likely that the Panthers were going to lose either way, so just give Bryce Young that experience. And I mean, so far he's been the reason why the Panthers have been able to stay in a lot of these games. I don't know what the benching did to him, but it's like, I guess it really flipped the switch for him. I don't know what it was, but it's like, this is a very cool story that we have for Bryce Young. But since we are incredibly low on time, I didn't even realize how low we are on time, I am going to have to go ahead and get into the next segment where I focus on NBA basketball and I do my predictions as well as I give a recap of all the games. Anthony's in the chat. Him and Tua are the same height. People make it seem that Tua's 6'1" when he's really at best, and I'm being generous, 6 feet, that was his cleats on. I think he's really 5'9". I mean, regardless, Tua's in a completely different situation, and Tua has actually, while I don't think he's a good quarterback, he definitely has value to Miami, and he's shown that. But that's really all that I have to say on this fourth segment, so now I have to go into the fifth segment because we are incredibly low on time, and I'll be right back after this short break. And we are back with the fifth and the final segments of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be recapping all of the NBA games that have been going down yesterday. And we are going to make some predictions on the in-season tournament games that are going to be happening today and the potential results of some of these in-season tournament games, right? So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, as we know, the Lakers got absolutely destroyed by the Timberwolves, so we're not going to talk about that game. The Bulls, they ended up beating the Nets 128-102. Josh Giddey ended with a triple-double, 20 points, 13 rebounds, and 11 assists. And on the Brooklyn Nets side, no one really played that well. So, no one noteworthy to really talk about. I'm skimming through a lot of this because we are low on time, so I have to, speed through some of this. The Celtics, they ended up winning 108-89 against the Miami Heat. Jaylen Brown had 29 points. And Jason Tatum had 18 points and 11 rebounds. Excuse me. Jacquez Jr., he ended with 19 points and 10 rebounds. Tyler Hero, he ended with 19 points as well. But again, just wasn't enough to go up against the Celtics. And the Hawks, they beat the Pelicans. And Trae Young ended with 12 and 15. He shot terrible from the field, 5 for 16 from the field. But again, those assists, they speak for themselves. But that is just awful efficiency. CJ McCollum ended up returning in this matchup. Same with DeJounte Murray going up against the Hawks, but they still ended up losing. DeJounte ended with 7 points and 10 assists, and CJ McCollum ended with 29 points. But again, DeJounte going 2 for 15 from the field is not ideal, and it's not going to help you win games in the slightest. Now, today is a very, very important day for in-season tournament games because this is where a lot of teams are going to try and look to clinch, right? So the games that are going down, the Knicks are playing the Magic, the Grizzlies are playing the Mavericks, the Warriors are playing the Nuggets, the 76ers are playing the Hornets, and the Bucks playing the Pistons, the Wizards playing the Cavs, the Pacers playing the Raptors, the Jazz playing the Thunder, the Spurs playing the Suns, Houston playing the Kings, and the Trailblazers going up against the Clippers. So let me just quickly try and break all of this down real quick and explain the significance. So as you can see, we have the group play. So we'll start with the Eastern Conference because that is a little bit easier to navigate. So I think right now there is 5 teams right now that are still in the race to potentially be able to secure a spot in the in-season tournament, right? Now, there's several things that have to happen because of that. So right now, Orlando is 3-0, and Milwaukee is also 3-0. But there are also 2 other teams that are 3-0, the Pistons and the Knicks, right? So the Bucks, they're going to match up against Detroit. And then the Knicks, they're going to match up against the Magic, right? So essentially, whichever team is able to win these games is most likely going to be able to become an Eastern leader in their respective group. And because of that, that will ultimately give them a spot in the in-season tournament, right? You can see that the Bucks, they're in the same spot as the Pistons, and the Knicks, they're in the same spot as the Orlando Magic. So if the Knicks win, then they'll be 4-0, and they'll easily have a spot in the top seed, depending on their point differential. But they'll be an Eastern Conference leader, right? Now, again, same thing happens if the Bucks win, same thing happens if Orlando wins and the Pistons win. Now, if either one of those teams lose, they're going to have to hope that they have a better point differential than the Boston Celtics right now. Because the Celtics have a point differential of plus 23, and they've already played all of their games, and they have a record of 3-1. So if any of the teams are going to be 3-1 that is going to make the wild card spot, they have to have a better point differential than the Celtics, which is 23. So as long as right now the Pistons, they have a point differential of 28, and so if they're able to maintain that point differential despite losing, then most likely they're going to be the team that ends up taking that spot in the wild card, right? It's dependent on a lot of things, so that's why it's rather confusing to explain all of this. And now we move on to the Western Conference, which has so many teams eligible to compete. Like, aside from the Houston Rockets and Golden State Warriors, who have already clinched, a majority of these Western Conference teams are fighting for a spot, right? Now, there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for all of these teams to make this spot. But most of the teams right now in the Western Conference are either 2-1 or 2-2. And even then, the 1-2 teams still have a really good chance of making it. And really, it's going to be down to point differential and record. It's a lot to break down, and I can't really do it justice in just this one segment. But from what it's looking like, it would seem like the team with the best chances of making it into the wild card spot is going to be either the Dallas Mavericks. Actually, yeah, it's going to be the Dallas Mavericks. They seem like they're in the best spot because even if they lose a game, they're just going to have to hope that another team loses the game. In fact, all of the teams that are 2-1 lose their games. And then they'll most likely have a much better point differential than the rest of the teams that lose their games. Realistically, the Lakers could still make the in-season tournament if things play in their favor. If the teams that are 2-1 end up going 2-2, and if those teams end with a worse point differential than them. So incredibly unlikely that happens, but again, it can happen. So that's really all that I can explain, but with how it works in the Western Conference, because it's incredibly complicated, and it's like certain teams have to win out, certain teams have to have a better point differential, other teams are going to have to this, that, and the other. It's very confusing, but when it's all said and done, I'll be able to break all of it down in the end. But as of right now, we're going to get into our predictions, and we're going to speed through them and then end the segment there. I think the Knicks are going to beat the Magic. I have faith in the Knicks. Their defense is bad, but their offense is great, and they're playing at home. So it's going to be a close one, but I think the Knicks are going to get it. The Mavericks are going up against the Grizzlies. I think the Mavericks are going to have this. I'm not entirely sure because this Luka and John Morant battle is going to be something special to watch. The Warriors, they're going up against the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are going to win. The 76ers, they're going up against the Hornets. I think the Hornets are going to win. Also, the Warriors, they do not need to win in this game, right? They don't need to win at all. If they lose, it doesn't matter. They've already clinched a spot in the in-season tournament, so they're totally fine. Like I said, Hornets, I think they're going to beat the 76ers. I'm finally going to pick the Bucks to beat the Detroit Pistons because it seems like the Bucks are finally back on the right track. I'm going to pick the Cavs to beat the Wizards, obviously. The Pacers to beat the Raptors. The Thunder to beat the Jazz. This one's going to be a tough one. Spurs or the Suns? The Spurs have been on fire with Victor lately, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with the Suns just because Kevin Durant and his value with the team. Houston against the Kings, I'm picking Houston. And finally, the Clippers, I'm picking the Clippers against the Trailblazers. So that is all. That is it. That's the end of this final segment, and that is the end of this show. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed on the next show, then I recommend using Super Chat or the link displayed below the ticker. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all that I have for on today's podcast, so thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.